Okay, let's just jump right in. We are about to open up a file on a theory so radical, it basically challenges everything we think we know about history, about evolution, all of it.
It really does. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Where we take these huge, compelling, sometimes really controversial sources and, well, we give you the shortcut to getting your head around them.
And today we are taking on a massive topic. This is a deep dive that really spans all of human history and goes right out into space. We're looking at the whole collection of source material around the Ancient Astronaut Theory.
And this isn't just, did aliens visit us?
No, not at all. We're focusing on the boldest claim, the one that really sticks around. The idea that advanced non-human beings didn't just pop by for a look.
Dogon engineered us.
They engineered us. They actively created our species and kickstarted our entire civilization.
So our mission today, based on everything we've looked at, is to get past the headlines. We need to unpack the actual claims, which are, surprisingly detailed.
They are. We need to figure out who these alleged architects were, why they supposedly came all this way to mess with our evolution, and this is the big one.
How they left their fingerprints everywhere.
Exactly, all over the globe. We're going from Mesopotamia to the American Southwest and all the way to this tribe in West Africa with just baffling astronomical knowledge.
And if you want to find the starting point for this whole modern conversation, you really have to begin with one person.
Zecharia Sitchin. He's the one who pulled the thread that made this whole thing mainstream.
Right, and this is what makes it so interesting. Sitchin wasn't just writing science fiction. He claimed he was translating history directly from the source.
We're talking about 1976. He publishes The 12th Planet.
Mm-hmm.
And Sitchin, he's an author, a researcher, and he makes this absolutely explosive claim.
Which was?
That he'd spent 30 years meticulously studying ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets, the oldest writing on Earth.
And he didn't just say the stories were myths.
No, he argued that the beings the Sumerians called their gods, the Anunnaki, they weren't divine. They weren't spirits. They were flesh and blood, highly advanced extraterrestrials.
Wow. And he put a date on it.
He did. He claimed his translations showed these beings landed in Mesopotamia nearly 500,000 years ago. To be specific, over 450,000 years ago.
450,000. I mean, that just takes it out of what we think of as human history and puts it deep into our anthropological past.
Right. And he didn't stop there. He didn't just say they visited. He gave them a whole mission.
Okay, what was it?
According to Sitchin's work, the Anunnakis were directly responsible for two huge events in our history. First, the creation of us, of Homo sapiens.
And second?
Their involvement in our near destruction during the Great Flood, the cataclysm you see in myths all over the world.
So he gave them a motive. That's what's so fascinating. It turns it from a simple myth into an interplanetary operation with a real goal.
It does. And this is where we have to pause because, it raises a huge question.
Which is, if they're advanced enough for interstellar travel, crossing these vast distances,
right?
Why couldn't they solve their own problems at home? Why come here for a frankly primitive mining operation? It feels like a major contradiction.
And that is the exact point that skeptics bring up constantly. But the ancient astronaut sources, they offer a very specific, almost technical answer. The whole reason, the desperation, it all revolved around their home world. Nibiru.
The so-called 12th planet. Though technically Sitchin called it the 12th member of our solar system. He included the sun and the moon.
Correct. And according to Sitchin, Nibiru is on this long elliptical orbit. It only comes close to our part of the solar system about every 300 to 600 years.
And what was the crisis back on Nibiru?
A planetary emergency. A devastating atmospheric collapse. The Anunnaki needed one thing, one specific element, to patch the holes in their atmosphere.
And that was gold.
That was a goal.
How does gold fix an atmosphere? That really does sound like science fiction.
It does, but the theory is actually based on real physics.
Okay.
On reflective properties. The source material claims the plan was to pulverize the gold into this incredibly fine dust.
Like an aerosol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then spray these particles into Nibiru's upper atmosphere where they'd act as a reflective shield. Basically a giant thermal blanket to deflect solar radiation that was leaking through their damaged ozone and to trap their own planet's heat.
So gold was the only thing that would work. Their survival depended on it.
It was the singular essential element. So their mission wasn't about conquest or colonization. It was a giant interplanetary gold rush driven by pure necessity.
Which sets the stage perfectly for our first section, the Sumerian records and this ultimate intervention.
It does. But that gold rush hit a snag almost immediately.
Yep.
The work was just too hard. The Sumerian tales that Sitchin translated, they talk about the toil and the arduous labor.
So the Anunnaki themselves, these, elite space travelers, they got tired of the work.
They grew weary of the physical grind. I mean, you don't travel across the solar system just to swing a pickaxe.
Right.
They were administrators, scientists, engineers. The manual labor was beneath them, and more importantly, it was just too slow. Their planet was dying.
So they needed a workforce.
You needed a workforce. And the solution, proposed by their chief scientist, a being named Enki, was drastic.
Let me guess. They decided to create one.
The deliberate creation of a worker race. A slave species designed for one purpose.
Yeah.
To mine the gold for them.
So they weren't going to wait around for evolution to give them a suitable hominid. They decided to just fashion one. This is the core of the genetic engineering hypothesis.
And the theorists argue this is not a metaphor. They say it's a literal description of a lab procedure. They lean on these Sumerian texts that describe it as an arduous process with lots of failed attempts.
But the goal was always clear: to create beings in their image and after their likeness.
That specific phrase is key. So let's talk about how they supposedly did it. What did they use?
What does the source material claim?
The sources point to the chief medical officer, a being named Ninma, and Enki, the scientist. M.J. Evans's work claims they found a suitable local hominid.
Like a Homo erectus or an early Neanderthal.
Exactly. They took genes from a female of that species, and after a lot of trial and error, a lot of failures described in the text, they managed to blend those genes with the DNA of an Anunnaki.
So they're literally arguing for the creation of a hybrid species, something more advanced but built for a purpose.
Precisely. The genetic blend created a creature that had the physical durability of the native Earth species, but with higher intelligence and, critically, the docility they needed for a slave race.
And the theorists claim this fundamentally changed our DNA.
It's genetic engineering on a scale we're only just now starting to understand, supposedly happening 450,000 years ago.
This sounds almost identical to the story of Genesis in the Bible, just with all the technical details put back in.
That is the theory's biggest claim. They connect the successful creation of this model man, the prototype, directly to the story of Adam and Eve.
But they argue the Bible left stuff out.
A lot of stuff out. That the Bible and other later religious texts severely redacted the story. They took out the lab work, the multiple failures, the political arguments between the gods, and the whole reason for humanity's creation.
Which was utilitarian. We were made to work.
And the Sumerian texts, the theorists say, are the original unedited blueprint.
So to really understand this, we have to look at the physical sources. Where did Sitchin even find these blueprints? We're talking about the discovery of the Nineveh archive.
This is so critical. The physical evidence for this entire theory rests on a staggering archaeological find in northern Iraq.
What was it?
Between 1842 and 1849, the British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard unearthed the ruins of the Library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, an ancient Assyrian capital.
And the amount of information they found is it's hard to wrap your head around. This wasn't just a few scrolls.
No. This was a royal archive with an estimated 20 to 30,000 cuneiform tablets, the world's first large-scale written records dating back to 3000 BC. They predate the Old Testament by thousands of years.
And in that massive library, they found 7 specific tablets.
The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth. Now, this version was written down around the 11th century BC, but it comes from much, much older Sumerian traditions. And this is the source that supposedly gives the step-by-step instructions for our creation.
Let's get into the specifics of that story, because this is where Sitchin's translation just completely breaks from mainstream academia.
It does. The traditional, the sanitized version, tells of the god Marduk. He takes the blood from a rebellious god named Kingu, and he mixes it with Tiamat.
Which is usually translated as clay or primitive earth.
Right. And from that mix, he creates the first humans.
So how do the ancient astronaut theorists get from blood and clay to a genetic engineering lab?
They argue you have to read the words functionally, not poetically. Blood, in this context, isn't just blood. It's the carrier of the vital essence, the genetic material of the Anunnaki.
And the clay.
The Tiamat, clay, is interpreted as the basic biological material of our planet, the primitive hominid cells. So the mixing is just a metaphor for cellular splicing. It's an instruction manual for mixing advanced alien DNA with basic Earth DNA to create a hybrid.
So they weren't just advanced in technology, but in genetics and bioengineering. But if they were so advanced, why did we mistake them for gods?
It's all about perspective. The sources say the name Anunnaki itself means from heaven to earth they came. So the theory is our ancestors weren't worshiping gods, they were just describing what they saw.
Which was?
Physical beings arriving in these giant, noisy, fiery spaceships. If you're living in the Bronze Age and you see a craft descend from the sky and these tall, powerful beings get out.
You're going to call them gods. It's the only frame of reference you have.
And their physical size would have added to that. The sources describe them as giant beings standing 8 feet tall. Powerful physical visitors.
Not spirits.
Not at all. They were flesh and blood here on a physical mission for a physical resource. And the tablets themselves, the drawings, they reinforce that.
Right, there's that famous tablet with the Tree of Life with the Anunnaki on either side. What technology do the theorists see in that picture?
The big thing is the winged disc floating above the scene. Mainstream history says it's a symbol for the sun or for divine power.
But the theorists see something else.
They see an ancient aerospace logo, a symbol of their power of flight. Maybe their actual spacecraft or their propulsion system. It's like the ancient world's corporate logo for their whole operation here.
And you can even see details on what they're wearing.
Absolutely. The carvings show them wearing what look like necklaces or wrist devices with stars and moons on them. Theorists don't see that as jewelry.
They see it as tech?
They see it as 6,000-year-old pieces of functional technology. Communication devices, maybe, navigational aids, or even, a 6,000-year-old wristwatch to coordinate their activities.
So the Anunnaki weren't just our creators, they were our first teachers who gave us the framework for civilization. Which raises a huge question. If this happened in Mesopotamia, was it just a local event?
Or did these same teachers travel the globe, giving humanity a push everywhere they went? And that leads us perfectly into our second section, these global echoes of intervention.
This is really the core of the whole theory, right? Finding the same patterns in totally separate cultures.
Exactly. They argue that if the Anunnaki were real, you should be able to see their influence far beyond Iraq. And the most consistent theme is this idea of divine assistance, of beings giving us fundamental knowledge.
And the most common example they point to is language itself. It's not just the Sumerians. You see this idea all over the world that language was a gift from the gods.
And that consistency is what the theorists find him compelling. I mean, think about it. In the Middle East, the Quran says language was given by Allah, by God. Then you go across the ocean to the Maya in Central America. Their sacred book, the Popol Vuh, says the exact same thing. The gods gave humans language and writing, but only after they were happy with how they'd created them.
And you even see it in Egypt.
In the Nile Valley, yes. Ancient Egyptian texts claim writing and complex language were skills handed down directly from the deities.
So the idea isn't that language developed slowly over thousands of years?
No. The theory is that it was a revolutionary software update, installed by an external intelligence right at the dawn of civilization.
Which implies a shared experience. That all these cultures met the same group of teachers before they all went their separate ways.
And it connects back to that huge leap in human behavior. The sources point to this explosion of complexity around 40,000 years ago. You get the first complex cave art, symbolic communication.
And the theorists ask, is that a coincidence?
Right. Is it a coincidence that this sudden leap in our ability to think abstractly happens right when these alleged sky beings were interacting with us? They suggest our minds were, well, kickstarted.
And they look for visual proof that different cultures were meeting the same beings. Which brings us to this really strange piece of art from 17,000 years ago in France, the Lascaux Birdman.
The famous Lascaux Caves, discovered in 1940. And among all these beautiful, perfect paintings of Ice Age animals, you have this one really strange image, a therianthrope.
A what?
A hybrid creature. It has the body of a man, but the head of a bird. It just seems completely out of place.
Okay, so what's the mainstream explanation for that?
Traditional anthropology says it's from a shamanic trance, that a shaman in a deep state of altered consciousness would encounter these powerful hybrid spirits and then paint them on the cave walls. It's a vision from an inner world.
But the ancient astronaut theorists, they flip that completely.
They see it not as an internal vision, but an external visitation. They point out that this Birdman looks a lot like the Egyptian god Thoth, who had the head of an ibis and was the god of writing and knowledge.
And it also looks like the Sumerian sky gods.
The Ushumgal, a type of early serpent bird deity, yes. So the question for the theorists is it a coincidence that a shaman in Paleolithic France is seeing the same type of hybrid being that civilizations thousands of miles away and thousands of years later depicted as their teachers.
So they're saying the trance wasn't an inner journey.
They're suggesting the shaman was accessing a real place, maybe a different dimension, the dream plane, where these same entities, these teachers, were still present and guiding humanity. For them, the Lascaux bird band is a 17,000-year-old portrait of an extraterrestrial.
That shift from cave art to something more like historical documents is a perfect pivot to our next section. We're talking about petroglyphs, rock carvings that theorists see as actual factual accounts of contact.
This is a huge leap in their method. They stop seeing rock art as just mythology and start treating it like journalism. If you want proof of contact, you look at what our ancestors carved into stone to remember it.
And for this, they go to the American Southwest, to the Zuni and Hopi tribes, who have these incredibly detailed oral histories.
Right. The Zuni Pueblo is one of the oldest tribes in North America, and they are known for guarding their star knowledge traditions very closely.
And their mythology is pretty explicit about this.
Very. Their creators and protectors, according to their elders, were the Ahayuta, the sky people. The stories they pass down are all rooted in this belief of a celestial origin.
And the drawings themselves, they look a lot like modern pictures of astronauts.
They're very evocative. You see these petroglyphs with figures that just don't look human. They have radiating wreaths around their heads.
Like a helmet?
Or figures with big shielded eyes and a nose that flares out. The theorists suggest that's a depiction of a breathing apparatus, part of a suit.
But the really powerful part of this is what the Zuni themselves say about it.
Exactly. The indigenous story has, according to the theorists, stayed pure. The Zuni themselves call these strange figures the spaceman. They refer to them as the keepers of the upper world, which is space. They see them as beings of extraterrestrial origin.
So it's not just a modern person looking at an old drawing and saying, that looks like an astronaut.
No, it's the descendants of the people who made the drawing saying, yes, that's a visitor from space. The Hopis say something similar about their katinas, that they came from the sky in aircraft to bring knowledge.
And this pattern isn't just in North America. The sources draw a line straight across the Atlantic to Val Camonica in Italy.
A UNESCO World Heritage Site, covered in thousands of these prehistoric carvings.
And there's one carving in particular that's become famous. The helmeted figure.
It's a striking image. It clearly shows a figure wearing a full helmet that encloses the whole head, and the figure itself seems to be glowing.
So the artist was trying to draw someone in a suit that was maybe reflective or had its own light source.
That's the theory, that they were trying to document something totally alien to their world. But there's something else on that rock panel that's even weirder. The communion rose.
What is that?
It's this strange, flower-shaped object with concentric circles. Traditional historians call it a sun symbol, maybe a star map, but the ancient astronaut theorists see it as technology.
As in the spaceship.
The vessel itself, the twirling, spinning ship that brought the helmeted figures to Earth. They think the swirling design is an attempt to show the motion of a spinning craft as it landed. So the whole panel isn't just a portrait of the visitor, it's a newspaper article documenting the whole event.
And there's even a local myth that backs this up.
An incredible one. The nearby city of Turin was supposedly founded by Phaethon, the son of the sun god Helios. And the myth says he came to Earth not in a normal chariot, but in a fiery chariot.
Which the theorists see
as really the story of a UFO landing on a mountain, specifically Mount Musin, which is right there. Phaethon brought gifts, technology like metallurgy. So you have the rock carvings of spacemen and a local myth about a sky visitor in a fiery ship bringing technology. They see it as conclusive proof.
Okay, so if the carvings are the visual proof, then our next section is maybe the most scientifically difficult piece of evidence to just dismiss: the Sirius mystery in the Dogon tribe of Mali.
This part is so compelling because it moves away from interpreting art and into hard, verifiable astronomical knowledge that was held by this isolated, non-industrial culture.
So tell us about the Dogon. They're descended from a tribe that settled in Mali around 1000 AD, and there's even a theory connecting them to ancient Egypt.
It's an interesting one. The hypothesis is that the Dogon are descendants of followers of the pharaoh Akhenaten who had to flee Egypt, and they support this with art. Both Akhenaten and the Dogon god Nomo are shown with these very elongated heads, suggesting some kind of shared non-human lineage.
And what's their creation myth?
It centers on a sky god, Amma, who created the first living being, Nomo. And Nomo is the one who brought them all their knowledge, agriculture, everything. The tradition says he descended from the sky in an ark surfing on fire.
Another classic sky god story, but the real mystery is where Nomo came from.
This is where it goes from mythology to astronomy. The Dogon claimed their god came from a specific star in the Sirius constellation, a star they call Pukalo,
And modern astronomy knows that star as Sirius B.
Sirius B. And that is the whole crux of the Sirius mystery.
Sirius is one of the closest star systems to us, about 8 light-years away. But why is it impossible for the Dogon to have known about Sirius B?
Because you cannot see it, not with the naked eye. It's a white dwarf. It's the incredibly dense, burnt-out core of a star. Robert Bauval highlights this. A pre-technological tribe should have had absolutely no knowledge that it even existed.
And we didn't confirm it existed until when?
It wasn't even photographed until the 1970s, and that was with powerful advanced telescopes.
But the Dogon knew about it for centuries before that. When was their knowledge first written down by outsiders?
In the 1930s, the Dogon priests shared this secret ancient knowledge with two French anthropologists, Marcel Griol and Germain Dieterlen. They documented it all, long before modern science could prove any of it.
So what exactly did the Dogon know that was so precise?
Three incredible things. First, they just knew it was there, even though it's invisible. Second, they knew what it was. They described it as incredibly small, but also the heaviest star in the sky.
Which is a perfect description of a white dwarf.
The perfect description. The Hubble telescope confirmed in 2003 that Sirius B is smaller than Earth, but it has 8 times the mass of our sun. That's a density that's almost impossible to imagine without modern physics.
And what was the third thing they knew?
They knew how it moved. The Dogon symbol for Sirius actually depicts its circular system orbit around the main star, Sirius A, and their tradition says it takes 50 years to complete that orbit.
And the real number is?
Modern astronomy calculates the orbital period at 50.1 years. Their symbol is essentially a perfect astronomical model they could not possibly have created on their own.
This is the real sticking point. How did they get this knowledge? They couldn't have observed it. They didn't have the physics.
And for ancient astronaut theorists, the answer is simple. The knowledge must have been given to them by an extraterrestrial intelligence, by Nomo, who came from that star system. For them, the Sirius mystery is as close as you can get to objective proof that our ancestors were taught by non-human beings.
It definitely makes you question what the limits of ancient knowledge really were, especially if it was handed down instead of discovered.
And if these visitors, the Anunnaki, the Nomo, if they were here harvesting resources, did they leave anything behind? Any wreckage? And that brings us to our last section, the search for actual physical artifacts.
So the idea here is that the visitors left after they got what they wanted, but maybe they left some debris behind, some proof that non-terrestrial technology was here.
Right. There are general claims, ancient figurines that look like they're wearing spacesuits, or a supposed 17,000-year-old chromium sphere found inside a statue. But the source material really zeroes in on one specific artifact that connects directly back to the Dogon.
The Sierra Leone sky stones, the Nomoli.
Exactly. The local legend connects directly to the mythology. The Nomoli gods fell from heaven, and part of the sky turned to stone and rained down with them.
What are they?
They're these mysterious blue or greenish stones found in West Africa, near where they find traditional Nomoli statues. They were found in 1991 by a miner, David Ledbetter. And critically, the local chiefs say that when these stones appear, large amounts of gold and diamonds are usually found nearby.
So you've got an artifact linked to beings from the sky, a rain from heaven, and the search for precious metals. It's a perfect echo of the Anunnaki gold rush we started with.
But the really compelling thing is the stones themselves. They're an enigma. These blue Nomoli stones have been sent to 12 different labs all over the world.
And the result?
Total confusion. There's not one piece of consensus among the geologists. We can't say for sure if the stones are a natural mineral or if they're man-made.
That lack of agreement is, for the theorists, exactly what you'd expect from something not from Earth. Why can't they classify them?
Because their composition is just weird. They have concentrations of elements you don't normally find together in nature, or their internal structure doesn't show any normal signs of how rocks are formed. They're not obviously a known mineral, but they're not obviously synthetic either.
And that ambiguity is interpreted as proof of an alien origin.
It is. The theorists suggest that the blue stones could be pieces of a spacecraft, maybe from that arc of surfing on fire. They could be pieces of a protective covering or a heat shield, like the tiles on the space shuttle that broke off during atmospheric entry.
So it completes the circle. It connects the Dogon's impossible astronomical knowledge in Mali to physical debris found in Sierra Leone, all linked back to visitors from the Sirius star system.
It's a remarkable synthesis of claims. It stitches together all of these seemingly random facts. Sumerian texts, rock art, African astronomy, and weird blue stones into one single comprehensive story of intervention.
And that coherence is what makes the theory so powerful for people who believe it. It offers one radical explanation for a lot of different historical and archaeological puzzles.
It really does.
So, after all that, what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to process this? We started with this idea of ancient architects and an alien blueprint, and we have covered a huge amount of ground.
We have, and we've seen the three main patterns that the theorists always come back to. First, that sudden, unexplained leap forward in human creativity and complex thought about 40,000 years ago, an intellectual jumpstart.
Second, these shared creation stories all over the world. From Mesopotamia to the Americas, they all talk about gods creating humans in their own image for a very practical purpose, usually labor or mining gold.
And third, the hardest one to just explain away, the possession of verified, advanced astronomical knowledge, like the details of Sirius B, by an isolated culture like the Dogon, centuries before modern science caught up.
Taken one by one, you could maybe dismiss each of these as a coincidence or a myth. But when the ancient astronaut theorists put them all together, they build a really consistent argument for some kind of high-level non-human intervention in our past.
It forces you to at least reconsider how we read our most ancient records. Should we be looking at the Sumerian tablets or the Zuni petroglyphs as just mythology?
Or as historical accounts. Eyewitness reports of a time when Earth was being actively managed by an extraterrestrial intelligence.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on after this deep dive. If the Anunnaki, the Nomo, all these various sky beings were really our teachers, and they deliberately intervened to change our development for their own reasons,
Whether it was for gold or something else.
what other fundamental knowledge did they share with us to speed things along? And maybe, just maybe, what crucial knowledge about the universe or about themselves did they decide to deliberately withhold from us before they left?
That's the question of the missing blueprint, and it's definitely something to think about the next time you look up at the night sky.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.